Hey guys, so excited that y'all are with us today. I'm going to go step over here. I only have 3 camera angles up, but this is Lewis, and we have Erica as one of our guests for today. She was an instructor at Florence Academy. She's been with us before, and she is a fellow Raleian and is back in town, and we are so excited. We're going to be doing this beautiful floral arrangement that's behind me. We do have photos of it, reference photos of it. All you have to do is submit your email. If you already have your email submitted, then the access that you have from all the other previous photos from the previous Painting from Lives, you will also have access to this one. We are so excited that you're joining us tonight, and please ask us questions. The whole reason we do this is to be able to interact with our audience and to be able to enjoy talking and the fun banter and everything in between. So come experiment with us, come paint with us, enjoy us while we are working on this beautiful arrangement. And right now, behind the computer, we have Caroline and Nick, and both of them will be on and off switching tonight, and they will be the ones that will be announcing the questions. So if you can't hear them on the mic or something seems to be going wrong, please let us know and we'll make sure to get it right. All right, without further ado, we're gonna go ahead and get started. So, woo! Today, Erica will be using her handheld palette. Yes. So if you don't see it and you want to know, actually, how about you go ahead and share with everyone what your palette? Absolutely. And do it like right here. Okay. And that way you can say, hey, this is what I'm doing, so that if they want to check it out, they'll know what you're doing.
Sounds good. Okay.
Yes.
I have here my palette. I'm using Williamsburg Lead White, Cad Yellow, Yellow Ochre, Vermilion, Alizarin Crimson, Cerulean Blue, Ultramarine Blue, and I also have Raw Umber. Here I have Oleo Gel Medium, which I don't typically use, but I ran out of oil, so here we are. And the brands I use typically are either Old Holland or Michael Harding. So
perfect, beautiful, beautiful. And just so so the audience can see, I'm going to show them your brushes.
Sure.
So beautiful display of your brushes there, and most of those are rosemary.
Yes, I have these bristles are Robert Simmons. Okay. And then the sables are rosemary brushes.
Perfect, perfect, perfect. And everybody, if you have ever joined me from Painting from Life, you know my palette, and you will be able to see me painting on my palette this evening. So ask away any questions you have. It's the typical brushes that I normally use. All right, without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started. The beautiful thing about tonight is because we are painting this lovely still life, we'll not have to take as many breaks as we typically do, unless Erica or I decide that our knees are going to give out. This one. What just happened with that? There we go. All right. If you hear me talking to myself, please don't send me away. Happens all the time, and I am a little bit crazy, but I try not to admit it to everyone except the entire YouTube universe.
Right now.
Yeah, exactly. So check out the images. I believe that in the show descriptions, Kelly has installed a link. Typically she does. If she hasn't, she will soon. Kelly also told us not too long from now she might join us for a Painting from Life, so you'll hear her lovely voice sooner or later. And let's see. As always, it wouldn't be a wonderful Painting from Life night if we weren't just a bit frazzled getting started today. Seems to be the theme of how we do things. One thing that we are proud of, though, is we are not afraid of failure. That is baked into success. We do our best to try to make things happen. And that just means that we're going to try new things and we're going to fail sometimes.
We were just
Honestly.
talking about having humble pie earlier.
See, right there, right there. It's a perfect example. And it looks like I have also, there we go, I have some oil jet there. So. All right, so everyone, you need to tune in. Tell us where you're coming from. Love to hear how life is in your area of the world. I'm going to be starting.
Mayantha Perez says, hi, I'm Mayantha from Colombo, Sri Lanka. It's 4:30 a.m. here.
Wow.
I might fall asleep while watching this. I'll catch up as soon as I can by tomorrow evening. Many congratulations to Alex on his exhibition.
Oh, and if he is actually on the road right now, driving back, and I will speak on his behalf. I have a big, warm thank you. It was a resounding success. I was speaking to him just before now, and they were telling me where they were on the road, and you know, it was such a wonderful time and experience for all of them. So I'll make sure to tell him. Sri Lanka, that is so cool. Thank you for joining us so early in the morning. Actually, I think I'm going to bring that over more. So, Erica has been living in Florence for, how long did you live there? Maybe 3 or 4 years?
It's been about 7.
7 years. You lived there for
Yes.
7 years. Wow.
More or less. I attended the school, I started the school in 2014, I think, and then graduated in 2017. And then after that, I started teaching at the 6 weeks course. So I've only just moved back to Raleigh, I think, at the end of July. So
Wow.
hasn't been too long.
It's funny, you know, didn't seem like it was too long ago, 2 years ago that I was over there to visit, and it feels like it was yesterday. Of course, everything cancels out with the COVID year. You don't feel like that year ever happened as far as like time is concerned.
I know, right?
So it feels like it was only like a year ago, but in actuality, it was a while back. But I tell you, you know, I mean, Raleigh's beautiful, but you know, you just can't, in the world, you can't beat Florence. It's such a beautiful place.
So true.
So,
but it's a place that I hope to go back to for sure. So
yeah, I'm sure you're already missing it.
Absolutely.
There's some wonderful things about here, but I tell you, when you've lived somewhere like that, well, at least you'll have memories that you'll cherish forever.
Absolutely.
You'll tell your kids' kids, and then they'll probably go try to have an adventure too. But I'm sure your parents are so excited about having you back in town.
Yes.
So speaking of where people are from, let's see, we also have Matteo Lapore from Italy. Let's see, we have Lourdes Maria Ong from Texas. Craig Daniels says hello to Erica from Canada.
Hi, Craig.
I thought for a second, Craig, I have one of my absolute best friends is named Craig Daniel. So I thought for a second.
No, Craig Daniels with an S at the end.
Oh, Craig Daniels.
We're good friends.
So my friend is Craig Daniel, who lives in Wichita, Kansas. So shout out to Canada at Craig Daniels.
And then we also have Vicky Sullivan says, hi guys from Victoria, Australia. Stephanie K, hi fellow artist from Ohio. Millie Guthrie says, hello everyone, greetings from Phoenix, Arizona. Tracy Artista, hello from Alberta, Canada. And Tracy also says, great to have you guys back. Loved Lewis's portrait sketch of Erica.
Oh yeah, that was fun.
And then let's see, Ara Gazarosian, I guess. Hi, guys. You've been very helpful with this program. I'm learning a lot. Thank you. Pasadena, California. Awesome. And Tina Figarelli says hello from chilly Chicago. Betty Knight says hello from Russia. We're getting a lot of different places.
Guys, thank you so much for joining us. We are so honored that you would carve out a little bit of your night to be a part of our community. So hopefully you'll enjoy the entertainment and the banter, for sure. So many beautiful places. Phoenix, Arizona, I tell you, I'll be back in town. That's the only workshop at the moment that I have still on my schedule at the moment. So I will be there not too long from now. Of course, it's a long time, but then it's like, time flies.
So quickly.
So it's really not too long from now.
Benjamin Lester says, beard is getting epic. I'm impressed.
Yes, I can't, I keep saying I'm delaying cutting it. At least this is my excuse to my wife, is I'm delaying cutting it for my self-portrait. So I'm looking forward to trying to attempt like a, old 19th century, Kramskoy portrait.
That's cool.
How he did like the one of Shishkin or something like that would be really cool. So, so we're finally getting to the length that I feel like would be exciting to paint. And I better hurry up if I ever want my wife to kiss me again. No, I'm just kidding. She actually loves it. I'm being funny. She's always just a huge supporter of whatever we're doing in this art community.
Erica, we have some questions in the comments about a couple of them about the easel you're using.
This is a plein air easel that I bought in Florence and shipped back.
Yes.
So my trusty easel, I think I got it at a discount at Zeki, and it survived all of my time there.
All of your beatings
and the shipping back. So. But it's just an aluminum easel. It's pretty light. Obviously this moves up and down, so I've kept it. I like it.
It reminds me of, well, we have a couple of those easels very similar to here, but I think that Mark DeLazio is who got us onto those, if I'm not mistaken. So. Now, does he still live in Florence, or didn't he at one point?
He and Tina are in Portugal.
Okay, yeah.
I think.
That would not surprise me. They seem to bounce around quite a bit. For those of you who don't know, go look up Mark DeLazio. He's an incredible plein air painter. Very prolific, does a lot of work all over the place. Erica right now, said that she's been working on quite a bit of botanicals, so this is right down her alley right now.
I find that I enjoy I do paint a lot of still lifes. In between when I do more figurative things, like those take me longer to develop and conceptually and everything.
Yep.
So, and I like botanicals, so it's a win-win.
Yeah, it's. I tell you, I really feel like doing still life and botanical work helps you with color harmony and design so much. It's kind of like you get to isolate things that you really want to focus on.
For me, it was delicacy of transitions and delicacy of hand, paint application. I first started doing it when I took that Michael Klein workshop.
Yeah.
I think that was 2017-ish, so I just graduated.
Yeah.
And you guys had just come to Raleigh. I'm like, what, you're here? I have to,
Gosh,
I have to meet you.
That definitely feels like yesterday, man.
And so I learned so much for that workshop.
Yeah, he's a great teacher and doing wonderful things up in Massachusetts. Right now, he's working on, if y'all don't know, y'all need to go check out the New Salem Museum that he's working on. He is elbows deep into trying to get that launched off the ground, so very happy for him. And believe it or not, that is where Alex and Divya are just had left, visiting there to go after his solo show. They went to go check it out. So right now, I thought it would be fun. Like I've said many times, I like to kind of use these nights as a fun way to experiment. So like right now, I'm decided that I want to start with this like kind of a sepia, black and white grisaille as a fun way to design, and then go from there with paint application. So we'll see if it works. Right now I'm having fun with it. Give it a bit of a golden look.
From what I can tell, it looks like both of y'all decided to sort of zoom in on one particular part of the setup. Is there any particular thing that you're looking at that you're looking to capture, or that kind of interested you enough to focus on that one thing?
That's a good question. Erica, you want to tackle that first? You
Sure.
want me to? Go for it.
Personally, I really liked this red flower. And it's a combination of what can I realistically do in 3 hours where I can have some sort of result. I find that in my own work, it benefits from a second layer of application. So it's better if I kind of zoom in and kind of do what I can in 3 hours, and then rather than trying to overdo it and on a bigger panel and then only get kind of a block in stage. But
Yep.
I really liked this, the kind of gesture, kind of reaching gesture of this little red flower. And these autumnal colors are really beautiful as well.
Aren't they? I'm so impressed with the floral design. I have, and when we take a break, I'm going to put her Instagram up, the florist who designed these for us, so that y'all, for anyone who may be in the Raleigh area or wants to is having a wedding anytime soon and wants florals shipped to them, I'm sure they'd be happy to do any and all of that. Or if you just would like to follow somebody that creates beautiful things on their social media, this could be the person to follow. So I'll make sure to put up her stuff. I'm going to add just a little bit of red so I can kind of marker this flower down here. What I wanted to try to do with this composition, to get back to the question, is, I'm more interested in trying to create a design element. And what I really wanted to do is single out this flower and sort of offset it onto the left and just have a nice, beautiful diagonal going down to the right where the pears kind of go off the page. And by doing that and zooming in, I'm not trying to do the whole composition, but I almost find it sometimes more interesting if I single out a spot in the composition to focus on. I can say here's the lead role of this play, this floral play, and here are the supporting actors and actresses, and from there, hopefully make something that feels very interesting and fun to look at. So, yeah. And like I said, fun to try this more sepia approach. Michael years ago did like this sort of sepia floral painting, and left it in that stage, and I just loved it. It just had such an energy in itself. So this might be that it's a bit inspired by that. Is anyone around the place painting along with us or planning on painting along as well? Give us a shout out. Tell us how you're going to approach this. Do you typically approach it the way you normally do, or do you try to like experiment with what we're experimenting with at the same time? How do you work on your pieces? So now I just need to do a bit of a drawing just to make sure I stay proportionally into where things are supposed to be going. I love doing these things because of just the sheer different approach, and I love having guest artists. I hope this is one of many that Eric is going to join us with, painting around. Wouldn't it be fun?
I'm down.
I think it would be fun. So, but just to see different people's approach, encourage you, painter out there, that there are many roads that lead to Rome, using a nice Italian reference there for our Florentine fellow. And to not be afraid of failure.
That's so true. One thing that I've learned, I've taken a lot of workshops from other people after my Florence Academy days, and I just find it fascinating how similar, in a way, even though your approach is different, often the concepts are nearly the same.
Yeah.
And what you prioritize, things like design, like you were talking about, like how integral that is. It's not just about painting what you see, but how you're designing and what you're feeling, and giving those priorities as you're working, and how that informs how you select your information.
Yeah, totally. The other thing I'm thinking about while I'm working on it is I'm going to try to create sort of a higher contrast here and then work down with more contrast or less contrast as I move down. And then when we get down to the bottom, it'll be quite colorful, but maybe the values will be a bit more compressed. We'll just see how that looks. Just going to introduce a little bit of color into this like energy. I love the brush work, but I need to make sure that if I'm going to make these things shine with warmth, I need to add just a touch more of a purpley blue back there.
SV says, I usually always try to paint along. Having other voices in the room helps motivate me. Also, the reference images are always beautiful.
Oh, good. Yeah, I feel like, in these particular florals, they really photograph well. When I was taking shots, I was like, wow, that turned out really great. Maybe I should just start becoming a floral photographer and just hang up this whole notion of being a painter. Yeah, exactly. What the heck have I been doing with my life all the way up to now?
Now, Erica, I see that the way that you started, is a bit more, I guess, barg, straight line. Is there like a specific mixture you're using to get those lines, or like what's your thought process when you're putting down those lines?
I am using the straight lines. This comes from my Florence Academy training. I basically am structuring my composition before I go ahead and apply paint. I'm using straight lines so I can get that kind of abstract, those strong angles that should read even after I add more information afterwards. The color I used is just a very, it's kind of this green right here. And
yeah, bring it over even further, probably. Yeah. Can you see that? Can y'all see that green? Yeah, coming over really quick. Boom, that green right there.
This one here, which is a general green that I see for the stem of the flower and some of the shadowy areas on the leaves. Something that kind of unifies everything, that if I leave it behind or if it mixes in with something, it kind of helps meld everything together. It doesn't stand out too much. Going for unity, I find that I can very easily break things up with color and everything, and you know, the more I have things unify and connect and flow, harmonize, the better. And I usually keep things pretty dry at the beginning, just so that if I want to paint over it, I'm not building up a lot of paint. I also personally don't like to use a lot of terps. I try to avoid solvents just because I paint at home, and so I don't want to have all that, you know, breathing in all of that. And so anytime I can avoid it, the better. So that's why I try to paint pretty dry, and then I can easily paint on top of it. It's quite flexible.
And the funny thing is I think on this round I am doing all the opposite things. I am starting very wet. I'm pushing things around. I'm staying very thin, which is also quite forgiving for the same reason that what Erica's doing. But for the most part, I am using solvents. And the reason I'm using a solvent is because it is allowing me to, for it to dry relatively quickly. And I usually don't use solvents. I use, if anything, I'll use maybe a bit of stack oil or lavender oil when I'm painting my normal paintings. But for these sessions, it helps me be able to paint over things quickly after it dries.
Yeah, I find that depending on how long you're working on it or what your subject is, how long you're painting it, definitely influences the approach.
Oh, certainly.
So right now I'm just getting a generalized idea of this flower that I want to be the star of my composition. So I'm not getting too detailed yet, but I want the general effect working. And then I will go into it and refine it a little bit more.
We have a question from Harriet, who says, please comment on your use of medium at different stages of painting, especially if you leave the painting for a few days and then need to paint on top, and archival issues in using.
Great question. Erica, how about you dovetail for what you were talking about before, and then I'll dive in after you.
So for a longer term project, I start probably the same way that I would start this, which is, again, pretty dry. And then if I use paint just as is, as much as possible. And then later on, I will use a little bit of stand oil that I will mix in with some of my pure color. And, you know, if I have to paint on top of something after leaving it for a while, depending on where I am in the project, I might just paint directly on top of it. Like, I don't oil out necessarily if I don't need to. I try not to use too much oil because I know that it breaks up the tensile strength, or it weakens the paint film if you go too liquidy. And so I try to keep within that. Is it the pigment volume concentration?
Yep.
I took the painting best practices.
Yeah, Georgia Hanlon's.
Yeah. I took all of that, and so, which was a really useful course, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's a very helpful course. Anyone who's looking to learn how to, or understand the science behind painting, I would highly recommend taking Georgia Hanlon, who owns Natural Pigments, and Rublev paints and on his site, on his Facebook as well, they have a painting best practices forum, and he also has like excerpts that I think they're like $15 per excerpt that you can watch different things that are important to you, such as varnishing, you know, or stretching your canvas or substrates, any of those things. And he's got a plethora of knowledge for anyone who is looking to grow their understanding. So highly recommend it.
I found it so useful, particularly because on the internet there's just so much information, and everyone has their own way of doing things, and it's hard to kind of weed through what works and what actually doesn't, and so learning the science behind it just helps inform my decisions when I'm painting. I feel like, all right, well, at least this is how the chemistry works.
Right.
Trying to find some truth amongst all of it.
Absolutely. So just to make sure, what was the question again? Because I want to make sure that I can add anything if I can. It was, what does she use? What should, for oils and mediums for a process that is usually longer. Was that the question?
Yeah. So about the use of medium at different stages of painting, especially if you leave painting for a few days and then need to paint on top of that, and then also asks about the archival issues that you may come across with various strategies.
Well, my approach is kind of similar to Erica's in that sense. I try not to use a whole lot, but I do kind of do a thin to thick, you know, fat over lean style of painting. So I use a lavender oil in my earlier stages, and then just use straight up paint in the middle stages, and then in the final stages sometimes I'll use oleogel as like one of my main sources of paint application for glazing. But making sure that at all stages I'm not using too much. And for me, it's always like it's a bit of a battle and struggle that I'm trying to create with my paint and how I'm applying it. You know, you want to just be right on the edge of control, in my opinion, just so you know, because it's all a balance of trying to like make something that feels archival or that is that the longevity of it isn't compromised. But yeah, that's kind of the approach I take, though. So I don't use just like I don't use a lot of solvents anymore. I used to, but I just health reasons. We're around it all the time, all day long. It's just not good. Honestly, even lavender, I don't keep exposed when I'm working with it, just because even I think in high concentrations has been shown to possibly not be good for you. So yeah. So I'd say just try to have a healthy approach to your activity.
For sure.
All right, let's see. Add just a little bit of color.
I have not been able to avoid solvents when doing an imprimatura. That's the kind of one thing I'm like, oh, I have to use it.
No, it's. I mean, there's always going to be a necessary season or time or
like
scenario.
When I'm landscape painting, and having to do something quickly and kind of layer passes, then.
Yep.
But if I can avoid it, then I will.
So what I try to do when I'm like working on a flower, what is this, a chrysanthemum? I'm not even really sure what kind of flower this is. I forgot to ask when she delivered it. It kind of looks like the top three.
The top ones are chrysanthemums, I think, and then is this one a ranunculus? I don't know. For painting all these flowers, I don't know enough
Yeah,
botany.
it's funny because Michael, when Michael and Josh were around a lot, Josh was quite the botanist and knew all of these like scientific names, but never painted flowers. And then Michael only painted flowers, and he's like, "Oh, well, that's interesting." Josh would be like, "What's that flower right there? I don't think I've ever seen that one." Michael's like, "I don't know the name of any of them. I just paint them because they're pretty." So, two different approaches right there is a good example.
Miria says it's a ranunculus.
I knew that out of our group, there's got to be a few fabulous botanists out there to let us know what flower is which. I tell you, artists, they have to be a little bit of everything. They have to be a philosopher, a historian, a designer, an engineer, scientist at times, especially with chemistry. And we can just add botany to the list.
Gail Knowles is asking, when is the best time to put in the background on a floral setting?
I personally love context. And so when I'm working on, say, for example, this painting right now, I like to put in the background at the beginning to establish the color harmony of the piece. Not everybody's like that. And, yet again, what I have found while painting and answering questions is that I've become more of an attorney than I thought I would, and I'll always say that depends. So, so it most certainly can be handled a different way, and you get used to how you handle it, or how one gets used to how they handle it. But in my case, I have found that I prefer to start with the background, work into the foreground, and then just continue to balance the two, especially if I'm doing alla prima. What about you, Erica?
I find that every time I've done it where I've painted the flower first and then painted the background separately, it doesn't work. It doesn't harmonize well. And so I try to basically kind of go back and forth, where I'll do a pass like I'm doing here on the major thing that I'm painting, and then I'll add in some of the background, and I'll go back into the painting, and then I go back into the background, so that way they kind of weave into each other.
Yep.
But I do try to keep in mind the final effect of the painting as early in the process as possible. And so if I want to leave a little bit of breathing room somewhere, that way I might not paint the background thickly, or might not have it eat into something too early, just in case I want to kind of leave some space. Let the imprimatura show through, depending on what effect I want to go for.
Absolutely.
But it's definitely key that they aren't separate things.
Right.
The background is a support for the rest of the painting. It definitely has its own role to play.
It also helps with edges.
Yes.
If you have the background in, then you have more control later with the edges of the foreground painting. So for example, I'm working on this right now, and I'm cooling off the background because I find that it's necessary at this stage for context. And while I'm doing that, I'm also thinking about the fact that when I put the flowers in, it's actually going to help so much with the edges, because I can soften edges super easy, I can sharpen edge very quickly and overlay it, and it makes it feel like that area that has a sharp edge is pulling really forward. And in florals, that's very important, because it gives you sort of a sense of volume and depth to a flower. It's a great question. Love it. So other thing I was like noticing is while I was working on this, is that the light right now that we have in here is pretty bright. And so I've keyed this painting, just the background just a bit too dark. So I had to lighten it up so that I had enough room and range of the darkest part of my floral to show through and to pull out from the background. So. Great question. Bring me another.
We do have a question about if either of y'all use odorless mineral spirits.
Well, I use something similar. I use Sol, almost called it Gambar, all the Gams. Gamsol, and it is a form of odorless mineral solvent. I don't know if it's literally an odorless mineral spirit, but it most certainly is playing the equivalent role. And it's great for when I need it. I'm finding more and more as I progress in my painting career that because I'm trying to, I find that I less and less uses for it, which is great because I used to use it all the time, and it was like, how could I ever live without it? And I'm finally getting to a place where I feel like I can create the same effects that I've been used to creating, but I've been practicing them in other ways, and now don't need to use them. So, but I honestly, my main use for them is I'll quickly clean them and then throw them into mineral oil, which is honestly used in the health field more as kind of like a laxative. You find it in the pharmaceutical area of a grocery store, but it's super cheap. And I'll lay my brushes in the oil, and that way they keep, and I actually don't have to use a lot of odorless mineral spirits. And so I never really wash my brushes. I wash them when I'm traveling before I go travel. And honestly, that's about it. I'll wash them about once, maybe a month. It almost sounds embarrassing. I feel like I'm telling people about my night brushing teeth routine or something. I swear it's not a bad thing.
Mia says, I try to use the wipeout method to start my paintings off so that I can avoid solvents. I think odorless still has the toxins, but you don't smell them. False sense of security, perhaps?
That is true.
Yep. They claim to be less harmful, but I'm just one of the proponents that if it is volatile and it's going into the air as much as it is, and you don't have an air filter, I think it would be probably good to healthy just to say, I knew several artists. Richard Lack actually is a good example. I mean, he suffered from dementia and all sorts of motor skill issues in his later life. And it's just one of those things. It's like quality of life in my older years. I just don't want to chance that. So I say, regardless of what the science says today, science is always evolving, and I'm not going to take a risk later on them being like, oh, never mind, it really is very harmful for you. I'd rather be ahead of that game.
It's also something to like exposure over a long period of time. It's like, I just don't want to mess around with it.
Yep.
Like I already use lead white, so that I feel like, okay, I can control in a way because it's the paint, like I'm not breathing it in necessarily. And
right.
So
Well, and
That's enough to deal with. Yeah.
That's another thing is
Yeah.
I use lead. I use lead white and like I use like 3 different lead products. And what I decided to do recently is I haven't done it yet, and there's one side of you that's a little fearful of doing it.
Yeah.
It's to go and get a lead kit test and just test every surface in your studio and see if you have any contaminants. But I would recommend people to do that because there's just so many easy to get like a secondary contamination. Yeah, it's one of those that, you know, in a way, kind of scared to do it, but also the knowing is better to know.
For sure. You're just in case you think, oh, I'm doing fine, and then
Right. And then all of a sudden you're like, I'm full of lead.
Yeah.
But your local family doctor can get you tested. They don't really want to, I found. And so they're always like, I mean, do you work in an industrial lead factory? And I'm like, no. He's like, well, then you really don't need it. And I'm like, but I handle lead every day. So could I please just go ahead and get it? So I would highly recommend getting your lead levels checked if you haven't. Highly recommend one who hasn't gotten it checked.
Or at least behave as if
Right.
everything is contaminated.
Yes, that too. Yeah, wear gloves. And I think
Don't
that's part of
eat,
the problem, is I don't wear gloves, but I wash my hands thoroughly all the time. But, you know, if you're not wearing gloves, I feel like, you know, it's probably good that you still kind of look into it.
I'm not wearing them now, but I wear them
right.
like 90% of the time.
I'm just going to go ahead and
Do as I
confess
say,
that
not as I do.
Yeah, that I'm a sinner in the artist world. Most certainly don't use all the painting best practices that I should. It always kind of got under my skin, like cringe-wise, because Josh, who has been tested many times, LaRock is who I'm talking about. He was one of our partners who founded East Oaks, and he paints his portraits, and he has, you know, we all have our habits of like wiping our brush or whatever it might be, and his was he would paint this intricate area on the face, and then he would always touch it and you know, squiggle it out and smooth it out, because he would always say, you know, your fingers, like, that nothing kind of really replaces that little smudge your finger can make in that kind of control. And I was always like, nah, go wash your hands, man. And he always did, and he's gotten his levels checked, and they're fine. If there's somebody that would be thorough about making sure he had that cleaned his hands well and properly, it'd be Josh. So I don't know if any of y'all are in New York, but Alex Venezia, the reason he's not here right now is he just had his solo show, and it was an exciting one. It was a resounding success. And so they are super happy and on their way back. We have missed them. I was talking to Divya, and she was like, I am so freaking ready to paint. Oh, we have batteries that will be ready whenever we need them.
So Benjamin Lester says, once you chop off your beard, you can use the trimmings for some natural bristle brushes.
Oh man, there'll be some scraggly brushes too. Let me just tell you.
Yeah, just talk to Rosemary.
Yeah, hey, we can make an exclusive Lewis Carr line. You know, that'd be really funny. Oh, and brutal at the same time. The new thing, your natural human hair.
You could pitch it to them as like an April Fool's announcement or something.
That would be actually kind of fun. I'm all about trying to come up with a prank. Let's see. 10 seconds or 15 seconds to grab the right brush in your hand. You've got too many in your hand.
Tina Figarelli asks, what are your thoughts on painting on linen? Do you prefer panels? I always find that linen will never pass my love for panel.
You know what? The funny thing is, I actually was having this exact conversation yesterday with a friend. Honestly, I have gotten so used to painting on panel that I love it. I will say that there are some parts and aspects of how paint pushes on a few different linens that I really have liked in the past, but for the most part, I really do love painting on panel.
It's something that during my FAA days as a student, I went on panel, I'm like, oh, I hate panels. I hate doing this. And then now I really enjoy them. And I find though that I will still paint on linen, but only for longer term projects because I feel like it can take a beating a bit.
Yep.
So if I ever need to scrape something off or, work or layer, or be a little bit more brutal with it sometimes, then I can paint on linen.
In fact, I think the last linen thing I painted was you.
Oh, really?
And it was because Danielle was like, hey, let's go paint Erica. You want to paint with us? And I was like, one of those things where I was like, in my head, I was like, I'm one of those that has a train wreck if it's not in my expectation to do something. And so I'm like, oh, well, I don't have a panel or canvas or brush. She's like, oh, I've got all that for you. And I was like, oh, okay, but I'm so glad I did now. Because I love that old painting of you. And, but that was the last time, and it was quite a rough linen. Like I haven't painted on that rough of a linen almost since probably 10, 15 years ago. So it was a fun challenge. Kind of made me feel like I'm doing an experiment with painting from life with them. So, but I think that was the last time that I can remember.
It's really useful for students, especially like a little bit of a rougher canvas. I think it was Classens 20 that we were using.
Yep.
And it's really useful for students so that they can feel comfortable using more paint.
Yeah.
Because if you paint thinly, it just won't show up, it won't cover, it won't do anything. And so that way you just get comfortable with it and you're not afraid of putting it on the canvas.
Yeah, truly. And I can definitely see that, I'm speaking to myself when I say that it took me a very long time to learn to really paint with a decent amount of paint. I used to paint, I still do. I still have a tendency to paint thinly. I feel like you get two different artists and they always need to kind of push in the opposite direction. You've got the ones that just want to slop as much paint on as possible and don't understand sort of the finesse of creating sort of a thick to thin and having a thin to start with in some areas. And then you get the other people who just are just too scared to try thick.
Yeah.
And those are the people you're like, here, this is a gravel rough canvas that you need to slop some paint on if you don't, for you to be able to see the paint.
As a student, I remember Ramiro telling me to wipe off my brushes. Because it's too much, just too much.
So you were a thicker painter?
Wipe them off. I'm like, okay.
Love it.
Only because when I was a student, particularly in second year, I heard so many critiques of like, you're not putting enough paint, you're not putting enough paint. I'm like, oh yeah, well, I'm not going to get that critique.
Yep.
I've heard that enough.
And they're like, ooh,
they're like,
okay, too much. You know, as an instructor, you also see that a lot. You know, I'm sure you did, where you'll give a critique and then they take it to heart, but then they like do the exact opposite. They're so pendulum swing the other way, and you're like, oh, I didn't mean that far. Yeah, bring it back. So.
But I always like when that happens, because it means that they're trying.
Yes.
Going for it.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd rather that
yeah.
happen than
Totally.
Then you kind of figure out, okay, that was too far, whatever.
Completely agree. What would be some of the experiences that you think were most transformative for you? Like, what are some of the ones that, like, if I just said that, all of a sudden it just comes straight to your head? It's like, this is one. I don't know if it's the most, but it's one. What are some of the things that being in Florence Academy, what a teacher said one time, what are some of the ones that you were like, that was a eureka moment, that was like my aha thing?
I can say that maybe there were certain projects that were transformative.
Oh, okay.
For me, rather than,
Yeah.
a single critique.
Yeah, that's great. That's what I'm looking for.
I did a cast drawing my second year with Daniela, and it was of this kind of old classic statue kind of tucked in the back that I don't think people had used for a long time. But I come from a background of classics. I studied in university, so I saw her and I'm like, yes, I like you. And so that project was transformative for me, not only because I was starting to actually just understand a little bit of the method now, and like I had a little more handle on charcoal and everything, but I really loved it. And I got to kind of put my heart into that project. I mean, I always cared about everything that I did, but that one I really, really connected with it. And it was fun to get the critiques from the instructors, because I think they could see that I loved it so much. And so it was fun to kind of not just talk about, okay, this shadow shape is too light or too dark or too big or too small, but then you got to say like, okay, what about these lines? What about these rhythms? Like, what do you feel from this? And I remember towards the end of that project, I think it was Per Elaf who said, like, you know, what was that thing that really drew you to it at the beginning, and like making sure that reads. And it was one of those, I think it was a kind of a transformative experience, because it wasn't just about accuracy. It was more about, okay, now that you have some tools, like what are you showing?
Right.
And, you know, it becomes more about your heart and, you know, how you think and feel about a subject.
Yeah.
And so that was really cool for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. Good answer. We have this like ongoing joke that from painting from life previous ones in the past, where I don't know if you ever had seen the game show Family Feud, but they'll have people on there and they'll sometimes give the most crazy random answers, but the family has to support them. And so they're just like, good answer, good answer. So, but it was a good answer. It was a really good answer.
And another one
Yeah.
Was a self-portrait I did in my third year.
Is that the charcoal one?
No, this one was a painting I did.
Okay.
This one I did, it was after, I think it was the winter term, which is always the hardest.
Yeah.
Emotionally and everything.
I was about to say, for more reasons than one, I'm sure.
And that, you know, I felt, okay, you know, I've done a few portraits now, like, you know, maybe I got a little experience under my belt. Okay, I'm excited to do this project. And mind you, I didn't know how to I didn't oil paint before going to Florence Academy. Like I learned everything there.
Oh, wow, okay.
Anyway, but
I didn't know that.
so there's me thinking, okay, like, you know, I got this.
Yeah.
And so, and I did this project, and the transfer drawing started well, the beginning started well, and then it just went downhill. And I just watched, and I also wasn't prepared, I don't think, for the intensity of the observation of watching yourself.
Oh, it's I think one of the harder things to do
intense.
in painting is to paint a self-portrait.
Like I had never done that before like that, and so I just watched the whole thing go downhill, and I was like, oh no. I think I was there on a Sunday, kind of working by myself, and one of my friends who was teaching crochet at the time, like he was there. I'm like, hey, like, can you help me out? Like, I'm in a tough spot, and I think I'd already scraped everything off, and he had come and kind of softened everything. He's like, it's okay, no. And I'm like, okay, great. Like, he left. I cried in the bathroom. Like, it's fine.
Yep.
And then on Monday, I'm like, Ramiro, I did this over the weekend. You know, kind of ready, like, what should I do? He's like, no worries, like, kind of redraw it, like, gave me a process to kind of get everything back. And it was that idea of, like, even if you mess something up, it's, you know, you can get it back, or you can transform from it, and it's like kind of failing a test, and then realizing, oh, if I do this, then I can, you know, still learn and still grow. And so it was that failure experience for me that I felt was really helpful.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Because then I knew in the future, I was never really afraid of, oh, am I going to mess this up? Well, if I do, I can always come back from it. And so sometimes those projects they're rough emotionally, but they're, you know, you can really learn a lot from them.
Yeah, that's so true. Well said.
So we have some questions from the audience. SV asks, any recommendations for non-lead oil-based grounds for ACM?
Non-lead oil-based grounds for ACM. Well, it's not oil-based. Well, I guess I'll first answer that question. Divya Melaleuca uses, this is Alex Benezia's wife, who also paints here, the great painter in her own right. And she uses I think it's made by Golden, and it is an oil-based ground. When Caroline comes back down, she actually uses it as well. It's very gummy, and it takes a very long time for it to dry, but it paints really well. The paint application on it is really nice. So I would say try that out. The other thing I would say is to use Golden's acrylic gesso. I know quite a few very known painters that actually enjoy painting on that. And so I would suggest that as well.
I can't contribute to that one, I don't really know.
So also, I think that Rublev does have a few like alkyd grounds that are not lead based. And they'll actually, you know, one knock to lead as a base or as a substrate is that it darkens when light doesn't hit it. So over time, you've got this ground that's under the paint, and it's supposed to be white, and white is used by the oil because oil is transparent. And so over time, it is darkening the painting. So for that reason, I also say, hey, you know, maybe you should give it a try, something else a try, you know. But good question. And I think it's a good example of how, you know, there's never a perfect answer.
We have another question. Harriet says, I painted a 5x7 of black Holstein and Highland cows last week with burnt sienna and ultramarine blue. Also tried burnt umber and ultramarine blue. Any advice on creating blacks?
Well, I use burnt sienna and ultramarine blue all the time as a form of black. And what I typically do is I'll paint a whole painting with those as that's the black. But then when I'm ready to make that one little thing in the painting be like super powerful and dark, I'll actually use ivory black to punch it and just make it a touch darker and add just a bit of burnt sienna or oxide red, whichever you call it, to it. So that's what I recommend doing. It really helps. It's a thin black, at least I think it's Michael Harding I use. At least his version of it is, and I really like it because it kind of just gives you that extra bit of deepness to your painting. Never be afraid of it. You know, I use black as a very low chromatic blue, and there is nothing wrong with black. You know, you got people that are just like, I'll never use black. And it's just, I think that that's a bit of a fallacy. You just need to know how to use black, and I think that's the bigger issue that people run into. I'm gonna go ahead and fill the rest of this thing up. I need to make sure that I'm staying on task and on time here and not wasting. I can piddle so much sometimes that I also all of a sudden lose track of time. All right. I'm gonna carve out this. This is such an interesting little guy over here to the right of the chrysanthemums. This little leafy friend. This is what happens when I don't know all the botanical names. You know, this little Johnny over here on the right.
In our pear project at school, we were told to name the pears.
Oh, see? What was the name of your pear?
Pete.
Pete the pear. A good alliteration there. Nick, I want you to come up with your clever name that you would call your pear. And then audience, you'll win a prize of recognition on this YouTube recording if you give me your best pear name that you would call your pear that you're painting. Pete the pear. I don't know. I might stick with the alliteration and be like Pancho the pear. But I feel like you have to almost come up with a nice personality trait of the pear as well. You know?
Well, that's why we did it.
Okay.
So that way, when you're looking at your pear, you're not looking at it as something generic.
Ah, see.
That's not my, I can't take credit for that one.
Right now, I think I know Nick pretty well. And right now, I think his brain is churning quickly to find a really good name for a pear. Am I right, Nick?
I mean, I'm a little bit on the spot. I'm not quite sure. I'm like, I don't know. You know?
Just say, yes, I've got you. I've got you pegged. You've got me pegged, Lewis. That's exactly what I'm doing.
Yeah, the best I can come up with is maybe Aristotle, but like that's. I really don't know.
Aristotle. I knew I could count on you. Yeah, we got to stop thinking about the pear because I'm going to start thinking of names for the rest of the night. All of a sudden, my whole painting is going to go to crap.
Lewis, what was the did you mention golden acrylic gesso? Is that correct? Okay, yeah, there was somebody that
Ground, they make. I might have to like look it up to make sure I'm telling you right, but it's basically just a paint ground. It should say ground on the can, but you know the great thing is it's acrylic. It's it's polymer based, very harmless, non-toxic, but also works great as a substrate, and it doesn't affect your like the archival nature and longevity of it is really solid. Doesn't seem to have any issues there. So
Gail says partridge, presumably as a potential pair name. Partridge, the potential pair name.
do love that, especially considering we're entering the holiday season. You know, a good partridge in a pear tree name is a good one. Gail, you win the prize. You're being recognized on the East Oak Studio page. Everybody go check out Gail's work. Gail, put it on your website. Throw it up here. We'll announce it. So is anyone doing anything fun for the holidays? We got that coming up soon. Thanksgiving, or anyone traveling, or y'all staying around?
Personally, I think I'll be sticking around.
All right, awesome. Your family have any Thanksgiving traditions? Are y'all like football game watching people, or do you like go somewhere, or are y'all Black Friday shoppers?
We're pretty relaxed. I think that we usually just have some good food and we eat early and and relax.
So y'all are early eaters. We're usually the ones that like, by the time the food's prepared, it's like 3 p.m. It's kind of like a lunch dinner situation.
Yeah, I think we usually eat around 4.
Okay, good. And I mean, you have a strong Italian family, right?
On my dad's side.
On your dad's side, see? So, it wouldn't be a good Italian meal if you didn't start at 4 and it go to 9.
Yeah.
If there's anything I learned living in Italy.
I really didn't mind it, eating dinner at like 8.
No, it's awesome. I don't know if my belly really enjoyed it too much as far as like, I find eating really late. There's an interesting phenomenon as I've gotten older, and this is just showing how old I really am, but I have found that the more I eat later, like I just can't sleep very well. I tend to like eat pretty early. I'm like that old dude. I'm like only 40, but I'm like, hey, where's the early bird special? Guys, y'all ready to go eat? It's 4 o'clock. I heard that, Nick.
No, I was, if anything, relating because, my wife, we got married just over a month ago, and she is a bit of a late eater, and I am an early eater, and I have had to sort of adapt to that, especially with the help of snacking to carry me over those last few hours.
Yep. Love it. Beautiful marriage. It makes, the thing I have learned being married is that it makes you see yourself in a way you've never seen yourself before, because you're like, you do things that are just autopilot for you and you just don't think anything of it. But then somebody else goes, you do this thing and it's very weird. And you're like, oh, I do that thing. I didn't realize it was weird. So, but it's fun because it actually helps you see yourself in a new light, and you will never stop learning. But I think we did announce that on the group, right? That Nick, you're a newlywed. So everyone, give your best wishes, good lucks to Nick. My favorite part of Nick's wedding is that they actually killed a family hog that they've been raising, and the hog's name was named by Nick, and its name was Vegan. So everybody ate vegan that night. And that, as funny as that is, Ed is a true story right there, ladies and gentlemen, true story. Everybody ate vegan. So, and I love that story, and I don't know if I'll ever grow tired of of telling it to, I'm sure, Nick's embarrassment back there.
Hey, I'm proud of that name, okay?
Yeah.
I stand by it.
I guess I'll need to tell a story to embarrass you. Let's see.
Although right now we have multiple like gallon bags of vegan meat in the freezer. We'll see how much of it we can get through. I mean, it's frozen, so it'll last a while. But we'll be eating vegan for a very long time.
Hey, that's the gift that keeps on giving, my friend. Gift that keeps on giving.
We do have some questions though. So let's see. Carolina Elizabeth asks, any thoughts on brushes? I use the Rosemary Michael Klein Botanical set with some size 4 and 6 filberts, but I need a softer filbert. P.S. I paint small florals 6x8 to 8x12.
That is a great question for Miss Erica, considering that she is in the botanical field these days.
So I've been using these Rosemary, I think they're the red sable, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
They have a botanical set, which they might even say that they're listed for watercolor, but it's fine.
It's the same. Yeah, it's the same thing.
And so you can
not the same thing.
I don't know if you can see on my little painting here the scale of it, but it's a little filbert.
Oh,
and I find that useful sometimes. And they have other ones that come in the set. They're a bit bigger and rounder. And it ranges also to something small and teeny tiny like this. I find that those are really nice for if you work small and you do florals. But the rest of their, I think I have some of their filberts like this, which are useful for obviously a larger scale. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, that's pretty good. It's way more involved than I would have been able to give.
I just happened to have them right here.
Yeah, see, that was perfect. It was a full-on show and tell. Can't get much better than that, ladies and gentlemen. Painting from life. Giving you all the educational advice you need. And of course, I am joking. I wish that were true, but
I know, right?
it's like what I would hope it would be. It's funny, I tell people a lot that the way I paint, especially because at the beginning stages for things like this, I'm experimenting, but the way I paint is I'm a slow starter and then but a decent anchor.
There you go.
so I'm looking forward to starting to speed up here in a second.
I was thinking similarly, all right, gotta.
These people want to see magic. Let's keep going.
We have a question from Shelly asking what kind of palette/easel is that? I believe we've already answered that for Erica, so maybe that's directed at you, Louis?
My It's made by Edge Pro Gear, and it is, and believe it or not, I think Josh LaRock just came out with his signature Edge Pro Gear palette, and it is basically, they make them in multiple sizes, and it's typically used upright. Like right now, it's actually on its side. And this is my favorite way to paint with it. But a lot of people use it in a more upright position where the palette, this part, is actually down in front of you, and then this part of it is flipped up like a laptop towards you. And Alex typically uses it that way. I like doing it this way because it puts the palette on the same plane as your painting. Good question. And that is Edge Pro Gear. They're a wonderful company, make great products. One time we had one YouTube watcher is just like, "Are you being paid by them?" You know, and I will say, and he's like, "You got to make sure to let them know legally that, you know, you're being sponsored by them or this, that, and the other, and you know, because you talk about them a lot." And it's like, well, people ask a lot, and no, we are not paid by them whatsoever. I will say, years and years ago, they did gift this to me, so it is a gift. And but this is what I paint with every day. I use this for every portrait, so it's not just like because I have been gifted this and, you know, want to promote them because I was gifted to it. No, this is a tool I use that I love every day. Okay, I'm going to start throwing down some color here.
Millie Guthrie says, "I love painting figurative art, portraits to be exact. Lately, I started to feel interested in painting plein air. Do you think this would be a benefit?"
Always. Holy cow. You know, I would say if somebody asked me what are the top 5 things that I think would benefit my portrait painting, I think the first couple that I would say is plein air and still life, and for different reasons. You know, and all of them, and sculpture, honestly, all of those fields are going to familiarize yourself with different aspects in that world that if you were that would actually help you more quickly learn a few of the aspects of painting, where you're not having to think about creating the identity of the person, but you're actually trying to do paint processes and thinking about color and value and hue and chroma in a different way. And that is why I think it would actually be very powerful to use. What would you say, Erica?
Absolutely. I mean, for me, landscape painting really, because it's so extreme and there's so much information to have to consolidate and simplify and make sense of, it really helped me understand the concept of design. I remember in school we would do portraits and still life, and they would say, "Okay, design these shapes and select information." I'm like, "All right, but you know, I'd love to, but I don't quite get what you mean by design the shape. Like, why am I like, if it's there, you know, I understand I'm not supposed to copy, but I don't really know what what I have to do to design something." And landscape painting really helped because, again, there's so much information. You have to consolidate it and lead someone's eye around. That kind of selection process really made sense to me only after I started landscape painting.
See? There you go. You heard it here, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great answer.
Also, speaking of landscape painting and the concept of design, Carlson's Guide to Landscape Painting is a book.
Oh, yeah.
And he has a really great chapter on design.
that's like the Bible of landscape painting, if I'm not mistaken, right? Isn't that what a lot of people love? They just say this, if you're going to be a landscape painter in any way, shape, or form, you need to read this book.
I find it so, I use it now. I go back to it. It's like, all right, if I'm confused about something, let me just go back to this.
Yeah.
And there are things that definitely apply, not just to landscape painting. And so, across disciplines.
Yep. Put it on your reading list.
Carlson's Guide to Landscape Painting, just in case I didn't say it clearly enough.
Yes. And it's always good to repeat those things, so that's good. I'm glad you said that again. In fact, we might even have you say that one more time later on in the show.
I will.
It's kind of weird calling this a show. It is a show. Very loosely structured show.
Variety show.
Variety show.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about this, like the whole live streaming phenomenon? I mean, honestly, it's just the next step for reality TV. Like it is basically reality TV.
I never thought of it like that, but you're right.
And it's more of a truer form. Like it's less scripted. Reality. I think like all reality TV just got more and more scripted over time. So we're not a scripted bunch. You ask us a question and we'll sometimes give you the wrong answer and sometimes we'll give you the right.
We do our best.
But reality nonetheless.
So I just wanted to say hello. I'm Caroline, and I'm still sharing now. Nick had to leave, so I'm here, and I just wanted to say that your guys' paintings are looking awesome. Like, you guys, this still life is so beautiful, and I've actually never seen a still life look like this before. The flowers are really, really nice, and you guys are doing a really beautiful job of rendering them. Yeah.
Hi Nelson, everybody. She is awesome, and she is working on some amazing, beautiful things upstairs. For sure. And she is also one of our artists in resident, and works very, very hard, and is doing an incredible job. So check her stuff out.
Thanks, Louie. One question that I wanted to ask, I hope that this hasn't been asked yet tonight, but I was wondering if your guys' processes have changed at all since you left your respective academies.
Oh, absolutely. If an academy does it well, they should release you into the world saying that you have foundational understanding for you to be able to create your own poetry. And the only way you can really create your own poetry is learning that the rules need to be broken, and broken in a way that makes sense to you. And you go to the academies to sort of learn the rules, so that you know how they can be broken and in what way they can be broken. So anyone who leaves in just painting exactly how they were painting at school, I feel like is doing themselves a slight disservice. And yeah, what do you think, Erica?
I definitely paint differently. And part of it just comes with, it's not something like, oh, I'm just gonna throw this away and kind of rebel against it. It's just natural. You find what feels intuitive to you, and what, even something as simple as what palette you start to, what colors you use. And I think when I was a student, so much of my handling the paint was very unsophisticated. And so, but it's also something that even if somebody told me how to make a certain brushstroke, it's like I wouldn't have really understood it at that time.
Yeah.
And so now I find that I can kind of play a little bit more given the kind of structure that I've been given.
Yep.
One thing, I mean, I went to Florence Academy, so I'm going to say my positive, good things about it.
Of course.
You know, you have a variety of teachers teaching you somebody different every day, and that was really cool because you get to see how so many different people approach the same content, or like you have a method, but you have different people and different approaches to the same method. And that way, the kind of personality comes out, but the structure and like core values kind of hold strong.
Yep. That's really great. And I think that that's the thing is like you see, you know, if you see the training through your work, no matter how you push it in different ways. And honestly, you still want to see that. I mean, there's artists that I see that are coming out that are doing far different things than what they were trained to do, to the point where I almost feel like they've breached the point past where you understand and see their training, and they're relying just on maybe reputation or something like that. And it's almost kind of like, well, what was the point in going through that rigor if in some way, shape, or form you're not representing anything in the training, you know? And then there's other people that I'm like, okay, you show, we still look like it's so close to the academia field that we need to, you know, my hope is that you find enough of an identity that's outside of that. Otherwise, it just will look like student work, and you don't want that. And none of the schools want that either.
Right.
You know, they want you to be able to create an identity, and you know, and it's encouraged even in school. It's encouraged. Some schools more than others, but. And I can't speak on behalf of Florence. I think that the amount of people who have made their name and have become known through Florence speaks unto itself that they encourage that.
It was definitely in my experience where it's almost like after they wouldn't really demo a lot on your own thing, you know, maybe a little bit occasionally if they felt like it was needed, because the idea was if I do this for you, like, you know, sure, maybe you could copy what I do and it would be successful, but are you really like learning anything? And then you become like a carbon copy of someone, and not out of pride. It's not like I don't want you to copy my style. It's not like that. It's like
I agree.
Encouraging your own understanding of how to create solutions to problems, and not just. I remember Daniela saying like, oh, do you want a formula? Like, like no, no formula.
That's great. Yeah, I mean that's what we do here at East Oaks. You know, when we have artists in resident and they can speak, we honestly. If you have been trained, we just say, hey, trust your training. Here are some things that might help, you know, but we also kind of do an assessment where we're like, let's just see if there's anything that we need to encourage you, or maybe there's something that needs some practice, but just start making work and we'll see how you're doing. And if there's a field that we feel like might help you along your trying to launch a career, because we're more of a career launching platform or studio than a school. And so that's, at least I feel like if we were to say we are successful, then that's one of the fields that I would hope that we could say we're successful in. Now, you'll have to talk to the people that have come here to see if that's true, but you know, I will say that I am quite proud of all of our artists and interns, because I think all of them are becoming quite successful. So, which is exciting to see. I don't think I actually told people what I felt like in my experience. I most certainly believe I paint differently than when I started. There's things that I've, you know, as an artist, you don't ever stop learning. And there's things that I've even learned since being in school. You know, I mean, if you wanted to be in school the rest of your life, you could be, because there's always stuff to learn. But there's got to be a point at which you're like, hey, this is what I've chosen as a career. And, you know, the reason they call medicine a practice, you don't ever stop practicing.
I was just thinking about that concept the other week.
Yeah.
Like this is more of a practice than a demonstration in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. What are we doing tonight? We are literally experimenting, at least I am, experimenting in how I want to paint, and how I can apply something. I'm testing things and trying things. And one of the reasons I like doing that on this program is I think it's important for artists to see that even professionals never want to stop learning, never want to stop like reinventing themselves, experimenting, trying new ideas, things that might help their work. And you're going to fail. You're going to fail 1,000 times, and that is totally okay. And encouraged. You should. If you want to try to be successful at all, failure is baked into success.
So it's the best way to learn.
It is, totally. And if you can do it around a community, it's even better. Find a community where you are and get plugged in, because painting, even for the most introverted people, can be a lonely world. So, and then people like me that are an extreme extrovert, like, I don't know how we would survive if we didn't have community. I had to start a local poker club or something, you know, something to see somebody.
So Mustafa, who has been a regular here, he says, hi from Egypt. Thanks to Estoke Studio for always providing great content in a free or semi-free way. And Tina says, these are coming along beautifully. Took a break from the stream and it's also well developed. And then Classic Al said, in response to our medical conversation, he said, true, medical error is the third leading cause of death. So at least we're not causing any death with painting. And then the next question was from SV, and they ask, do you take applications for residency?
We do. You can email us at estokestudio.com and say that you're interested. It's rare that we open it up because there's very few of us. I often say this, I would like to reiterate it. What we wish we could do for many, we do for a few. And when we have an opportunity, we announce it, and you can apply and just get on our email list to apply. And we would be honored to have you if we can find a way to make it work. So we will probably be opening up opportunities this next year for people to come, and we do them in like 3-month intervals, and just to kind of see where you are and help you. You know, each one is basically assessed to where you are and what we need to do to help you accomplish. First and foremost, it's about creating a positive culture that will encourage you to launch your career, and vice versa, that you would be there to encourage each other to launch theirs. So, but yeah, I will say we're not a big program. We're a very tiny program. So we wish we could do it for everybody, but that's why we do video, is so that the people we can't do it for, we do this. And I would just love to put out another shout out to Mustafa. Always love having you, buddy. I'm so glad to know that you're out there and you're with us tuning in. Truly one of the greater supporters of Estoke Studio since the beginning. So we We appreciate you and love you. Thank you. Also, to the medical practice thing, it reminds me of a quote by Jeffrey T. Larson. Look his work up if you don't know him. But he makes a quote that basically he's like, you know what? I mean, experiment and don't worry about failing, because what's the worst going to happen? You fail and, well, nobody died. So, firm believer in that. At the end of the day, nobody died.
On a kind of tangent related to that
Yeah.
subject, not so much about failure, but about having kind of some realistic expectations. One of the coolest things that I saw when I was in Italy, I went to this exhibition, I think up in Milan, of pre-Raphaelite painters, and they had like a water house there, a few of them, and they were super cool. But as well as like Rossetti and everyone else. But they had sketches, like the concept sketches that they had drawn on like napkins and stuff, and it was so cool because they were ugly, like they weren't pretty.
Yeah.
They were just like, they weren't meant to be. They were just meant to communicate a general idea for the person who was drawing them. And I looked at that, I'm like, oh, this is so great, because it's not
so
just
refreshing.
like, oh, look at my amazing drawing that I just like whipped up out of nowhere because I'm such a genius. It's like, it doesn't work like that.
Yep.
You know, it always came from somewhere, and it takes time to develop ideas. It takes time to develop compositions, and you know, I just think about floral painting. Like there are a lot that don't go on social media.
Oh my gosh, yes, yes.
And you just keep going and keep learning and keep growing. And you know, sometimes it's okay to have a project where like it's okay to mess up on this, or like to have a sketchbook where you don't have to make things that look good, and kind of giving yourself permission to do that.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like it's a good concept to share with people.
Absolutely. You know, if you go to any real professional artist studio, you'll see just piles and piles and piles of paintings that are on pallets, stacks of, you know, I remember going to Sean Cheatham's apartment, into his studio, and I was just blown away by, he probably had 200 panels that had paintings on them that I'd never seen. There were demonstrations and you know, whatever, and they're not necessarily failures, but they're just experiments.
Right.
And, you know, things that you're not happy with, or you want to try out something different, or, you know, or create something new with, or whatever. And, you know, that always made me feel really good. I was like, okay, all right, you know, that's good stuff.
Well, it's just much more human. I think often we kind of prop up, whether it's old masters or other people, like they become this thing that's not real anymore. It's not human anymore.
Yep.
And you know, as absolutely skilled and amazing as those people were, you know, it took work. It didn't just like come out of
just
nowhere.
happen, right?
It took time.
I remember seeing a Rembrandt sketch, and the anatomy of it was just so wrong, and going, yeah, see, no, even he had a bad day, you know. Made me feel so much better.
I remember when I went to the Rochester Museum of Art, and I went and saw this Rembrandt painting, and like the head was so beautiful, but the hands were so terrible. And like it was some of the worst hands I've seen painted before. And I was like, wow, this great master just like, he probably didn't finish this painting, or he just lost interest and just left these hands not well painted. And it was like really awesome to see that, because it really made him more human and less like an old master god or something like that.
Exactly. These people were not wizards. You know, they had their own amount of genius, but even genius people have fault and flaws and don't always get it right. We're still human. So that's beautiful. Beautifully said. Doesn't make me respect him any less either. If not, if anything, it makes me respect him more. Because it makes me go, okay, like if he had a bad day, then it's all right. It's all right to have a bad day.
It's also funny to think about that he probably never intended for that painting to leave his studio, and now it's in a museum. Can you imagine having like your mistakes displayed in a museum for thousands of people to see?
I want to go burn them tomorrow. That's a good point. Have you ever like thought, okay, I do need to like throw these away or burn these paintings, but then you're like, but I put hours into that. I don't know if I can do it. I find it kind of difficult.
I had so much schoolwork that I hoarded
Yep.
for that purpose.
And then eventually I found like, especially stuff from my like college years that I like opened up and I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
oh man, no, this doesn't ever need to see the light of day ever again.
Yep.
I don't care how many hours I put into it.
Yeah, after my move from Florence, a lot got thrown out.
Oh, I bet.
So much of it.
Bet.
Though I did keep my first pencil drawings, like that first week of school, my
Yep.
first like figure drawings. I kept them I kept my first one of first year, and then the last one I did of first year, so I could kind of look back and be like, oh yeah, I learned a lot that year. And just to kind of, not to even show anybody else, it's more for myself, just to be like, keep going, because if you keep going, you will grow, you will improve.
That's awesome.
So I was wondering if you guys have, like, there's always that question where you're like, who are your favorite artists? Like, who inspires you? But I would rather ask, like, what are things outside of the art world that inspire you? Like movies or books? Like, what is out there that that strongly informs your work?
Caroline, good question. Aha.
You can go first while I
Okay,
come up with my
okay.
answer.
Well, I mean, there's a lot I'm inspired by, but there's definitely a couple of photographers that I have like seen that I just really highly respect their work. There's compositional elements and like narrative that's being said so subtly in some of these photographers that I follow. And I follow a lot on like Instagram, but you know, I have some like books and stuff as well that I love looking at. I'm also, I find myself, lately I've been doing this thing where I listen to a podcast that is a poem a day. It's a daily poem. And I talk so often about my work trying to strive for it to be poetry, because it is the same idea. You're metaphorically trying to limit your subject matter and your craft in a clever way that hopefully expresses and unlocks something in people's minds that's even deeper than if you were to clarify every bit of it. And so with that in mind, I find some of my bigger inspirations to not be in painting, but actually in poetry and songs. There's so many songs where I'm like, now that line, that's a whole series right there waiting to happen, you know, a whole painting series. So I find inspiration there. I am a Christian, and there are concepts scripturally and truths and wisdoms that I think that are quite universal, that I think all people love and can find truth in. So, you know, I have times where there's expressions that I want in there. So, and if I have time to think about it, I can come up with like actual examples. But those are definitely fields. I listen to a lot of music, so because I paint all the time. Podcasts and science, that's another one, because I have a science background, and I actually got a science degree, and so there's a lot of times where there's stuff that I want to express in this field that relate to my scientific understanding. So, and I feel like that's kind of unique.
Trying to think of my answer. So perhaps my biggest inspiration that's non-art related. I don't know, that's a tough one. Music for sure. So I have like you have a science background, I have a classics background.
Right,
so
right, yeah.
I find that I keep going back to that. Like I keep going back to mythology and the epics, like you know, Homer and Virgil, and Ovid's Metamorphoses. And so, like whenever I find I always just somehow find my way back there. And so, like during my time at school, because I was learning so much about these painters, like oil painters, I just never learned about during my school time at university or before. I had this like classics background, and it went up to the Renaissance, and then I had this empty period until the 1960s when I had to take a contemporary art history class in college. So I had this like huge gap that FAA started to fill with other painters. But then now, like as I start to think about what am I going to do with my own work, I find I keep kind of going back to those roots of what I really enjoyed, kind of even in kind of high school and in college.
Yeah. What a great answer. Have you ever thought about doing more allegorical paintings or finding a different way to like finding a different way to like interpret the same?
I've done a couple Medusa paintings now, and I'm thinking of going back again into the Metamorphoses and looking at more things there that but putting my own kind of idea on it, as cliche as that sounds. Well, it's more of not so much it's that it's my own idea. It's more like what parts, or like what would I kind of tweak about it with my own mindset now? Like, you know, if I could change something of the story, like what would it be? And even if it's just like, for example, like when I was doing these Medusa paintings, I wasn't trying to necessarily be perfectly accurate to what was written in text, or you know, or what you could find historically on other like vase paintings and stuff like that. It's like, you know, those are already kind of genuine and beautiful in their own ways. Right. And so it's like, well, what can I bring to the table? It's, you know, it's hard to articulate, but.
I love that.
I just had to look at my painting for a second.
Yeah, all of a sudden, like you start talking, and then you realize, oh wait, I'm painting. I need to like think about painting for a second.
Got to get a move on.
That's how I always feel. I feel like I'm always going, oh, I need to keep going. just trying to like, I'm going to roughly put in this bottom. Well, that's beautiful. You know, Josh, I think that was always his heart, was to want to be able to paint allegorical paintings. And had done several in his own right. It was always one of his loves. It makes me think of him. I always got to be careful because I hum.
Interesting.
Yeah, there are.
Because they're so weird.
Yeah.
But at the same time, familiar.
Yeah, because
it just like
there's some sort of
does both
human element to them still. Like they're weird, but then you realize how like twisted and weird we are as humans sometimes when you hear if you just turn the news on. And so you're like, oh, okay, I can see how that came out of somebody's head, you know.
I find them fascinating.
That is awesome.
What are some of your favorite myths?
I like Baucis and Philemon is a good one. It has a really, I think, beautiful story. I'm not going to try to summarize it.
Okay.
Just, I would suggest you just read it. It's really cool. Narcissus and Echo is really cool if you look at the language. And I remember in my Latin teacher will be happy. I remember in like translating it back when I took Latin in high school, and there's a lot of like really interesting kind of word play with like the echoing bits, and so that's a really interesting one too.
That's cool. I have never dove in deep enough to know, so that's really, really awesome. I took Latin, that's as far as I got in that field.
Yeah?
Yep. My grandfather taught me Latin.
That's cool.
Yep, back when in middle school. So it's one of our bonding moments.
I loved it because it was so old. It felt like this like a mysterious secret thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I also took Latin in high school and like I guess throughout middle school and high school. And the only parts I liked about it was the mythology parts. Because I don't know, I struggled with language and stuff, and I already struggle with English, so learning another language is a little bit difficult for my brain.
I must say I really liked the grammar because it was so structured. Like it was like the kind of fitting in a puzzle. So I kind of really enjoyed the organization of things.
That's awesome. I have several friends that were classics majors. One was kind of like emphasized more in philosophy, and the other one, I think she was similar. I think she was like, did more like Greek mythology and something else in that field. I can't remember exactly what. And now she's an attorney. I feel like a lot of those people end up being like attorneys because it's a, you know, I think they're similar fields, you know. Are you the one that wins the arguments in your family?
I'm just so rational and no, but I actually did more of the archaeology route, so it was basically
that's awesome.
Glorified art history.
Did you actually go on a dig?
No.
That would have been cool.
Though I did take, I think for my major, I was required to take like a principles of like archaeology in terms of field stuff. So learning about, I think I had to learn about what restrictions there are when you have to dig, and like how the government gets involved, and like, you know, process it.
Of course, the government's got to get involved.
Do that.
Well, actually, I think any government would probably want to be involved, and that's because they're the ones protecting it.
Yeah.
So that's probably, at least in Italy's form. That's why like they can never finish a subway in like Rome, because they've been working on the same subway line, I think, for like 40 years, and they just keep hitting.
They keep finding stuff.
Yeah, they keep finding stuff underground, and they're like, oh well, that used to be a a stairwell to Saturn's, temple, and yeah, you can't do that. We got to like preserve this, and so they can't ever, finish a project underground. So, but luckily, the government's there to help with that and make sure that they don't, because, we don't want to lose some valuable history. But I remember going to Pompeii and seeing people on a dig, and that was fun. And seeing what they were uncovering, and like the mosaic they were uncovering was pristine. It was so beautiful. I was like, wow. I'm sure it's fully excavated now, but at the time it was only like halfway done. But sadly, that was like 15 years ago. So they've probably been like, oh yeah, we've had kids since we worked on that project.
So Gail said Bacchus and Philemon? Absolutely a favorite. Good wedding present for Nick. I'm not going to pretend to know what that means.
What was it again?
Bacchus
and Philemon.
So Mustafa said, I am a follower of East Oak Studio way so far since Lewis didn't have a beard. Laughy face.
Yep. The beard's not forever, but it most certainly is for now. It's funny because it makes you feel like you have a whole new identity that you've never had before. It's kind of fun. Women color their hair. Men color their beards. No. I am actually having so much fun. What do y'all think? Erica's pretty awesome, isn't she? Not Eric. Eric is not here. I don't know where Eric is. Yeah, Mustafa he's prolific in his own right. I see him doing all sorts of things all the time. He most certainly is making a presence in the art world. And driven, very driven.
Do you guys have any activities outside of painting that you feel like adds to your painting, like going to a museum or going to see a ballet, like anything like that?
Well, museums for sure. I feel like seeing work live and not just on the screen. Mm-hmm. It's like you don't need to see like necessarily like the fanciest collections or this or that, but just seeing like some real paintings in real life can just help your practice so much. Like it really helps understanding what is an interpretation and what is, or let me rephrase that. It's so easy when you're painting to get into the copy mindset.
Yep.
And then when you see paintings in real life, it's easier to then see, oh, they didn't include everything, even the most like realistic paintings. Like,
yeah.
it's like the closer you get, it's not necessarily like, it's not like you can zoom in on your phone on a photograph where it gets more detailed. It's like there's design. I just think it's really healthy as a painter to every so often kind of ground yourself in that and be like, okay, actually, what am I simplifying? What is the essence of what I'm trying to communicate, and what information do I need?
Love that. Very well said. I would say that I am a firm believer. Well, when I say I'm a firm believer, it doesn't mean I'm always practicing it. So let's just go ahead and say that, because I most certainly have not practiced this lately. Calling myself out. But I do believe in balance in your life. That I think that sometimes the thing that most can help your thing is by finding the ebb to your flow. The ebb for me is exercise and social interaction. It's very stimulating for me to do that, and inspires me in a lot of ways of different things that I want to paint or express in my work, because of like really like living through the human condition through my relationships, and then exercise is very important, and reading is very important to me, and trying to, I love to, well, it's like we were saying earlier, I love to consume a lot of content while I'm painting, especially. And that is really helpful for me. So all of those things, it's for me, it's about balance. And if you want to be a really good painter, you need to find a way to recharge yourself in your ebb to your flow. So that's what I would say. I love sports. Honestly, I found that I'm not alone. I thought for a while that I was like the only sort of artist in our field in realism that it's kind of has like a bit of a jockey side to him. But all of a sudden you find out that like Julio Reyes was like played college soccer and was like really big into trying to go, almost went like semi-pro. And then you have Robert Liberace, who played baseball, I think, like in college, and still that's a huge part of his life. And you start talking to all these people and seeing that they have sports in common too, and you realize that part of their discipline comes from that. And it most certainly comes from me. That's one of the areas it comes from for me. So. So that is what I love to do. I love playing like ultimate frisbee. I just pick up games that happen around town that I join, and then there's all sorts of things like that. Doing fun things with my wife. Spend time with my dog. Now y'all know my whole life. And everybody here can vouch for me. That's about all I do. Past that, there's not much that happens. I'm painting or doing something with them.
I think I always feel a little bit more recharged if I like go on a walk and I have the sun on me. Just nature is very rejuvenating and very grounding, because now the sun sets at like 5 p.m. and the light goes away. I need that serotonin. So I find it really important to like take a break and go on a walk every once in a while. But Erica, for you, Harriet asks, did you create a mother color green and then add something to darken and lighten? Thanks for sharing. I have way too many tubes of green paint.
I typically react to what's in front of me, so I will create the mixture just depending on what kind of green I see in front of me. There's like green varies so much.
Yeah.
And so while it is helpful sometimes to have like a mixture that you could kind of pull from, so that way things don't get too varied, but I usually adapt it to what's in front of me. I don't know if you can see my palette right now.
You know, can you? Okay.
I started with this kind of shadow green here, and then I've like lightened and darkened and made it muddy. Sorry,
it where?
like this?
Move it to the left a little.
Left.
Yes.
So it started like this, and then I kind of pulled from it lighter, and made some cooler versions, and then now it's ugly and muddy. But it's helpful when you do that, so that things don't get too far apart and too broken.
Is your arm ever sore from holding your palette? Because I remember when I used to hold my palette all the time, I would go home and like my bicep would be really tense because I was like holding it in this really odd position. Do you suffer from that?
I don't hold my palette all the time, but in something like this, I think I get so into what I'm doing that I don't even think about it. And then later I have to like unlock my hand from my brushes and palette.
It's fun trying to figure out, like, this is like some of my favorite stages, because you're trying to go, okay, what do I want to abbreviate? What's important?
Yeah.
Kind of like what you were just saying a second ago, what needs like more color harmony? Do I need to cool this down, warm this up?
That's what I find too, like for me, my work benefits from a second pass.
Yes, oh yeah.
Trying to do it all at once, I find I tend to break things up too much because I'm trying to do everything.
Yep.
And then, so it's usually better when I go over it again, then I can maybe calm down some areas or bring out other areas and adapt it.
You and I are very similar in that sense. That's why I actually enjoy doing alla primas, because I'm so out of my comfort zone as far as that's concerned. So it helps me practice something that I'm not used to.
Yeah, I find varying the time that you do a project, like having some quick ones to interrupt long ones.
Yep.
So you don't, in a way, like don't get complacent with your pace.
Yes. Well, it's funny. I was talking to somebody about this a while back, and I was relating it to a marathon trainer, a marathon runner, like a pro, and saying, they don't just run 50 miles all the time.
Right.
They do speed training as well as endurance training. And so they do these short sprints of 2 miles to like get their body used to going at a higher pace.
Yeah.
And then they go back and they go, okay, now it's time for me to do like the long thing so that you get your body used to that. And it's the same thing in painting, These alla prima things are so good because then you have a chance to like sprint and train in the sprinting world. So.
Somebody had asked about landscape painting, whether it was helpful for portrait painting, and it's along that same line, because you have to be decisive when you're painting plein air.
Yes.
And I find that action, it's not just like searching, if you have time,
right.
I can like think about it, but if you only have 3-hour window and your light is just constantly changing, like you have to decide. And so that's a great practice.
Yes. 100% agree.
Have you guys had any favorite places that you've gone plein air painting before?
I haven't done too much here in North Carolina, but I recently went to the Sarah Duke Gardens
Yeah, yeah.
And those were beautiful. So beautiful.
I actually I don't have like a favorite spot. I think that, I'm trying to think of some of my favorite spots I've ever plein air painted. I think one of them would have probably been Florence.
I was
You know,
thinking, like, well,
go to Daniela's place, and every
seeing Tuscan hills.
Yeah, 180 degrees of plein air painting fodder at your fingertips. But I actually should probably find, Jordan Lake has a few great spots, but I think that it would be fun for me to go out. I keep promising myself, like, fall is like my favorite season. And I keep promising myself to, like, escape for a weekend and go into the mountains.
Oh, that's so
in
nice.
Asheville or somewhere outside, like up in the mountains somewhere, and just paint.
I like that.
You know, so we're talking, Erica, you could be a part of this. We're talking about maybe taking a hiking crew and all going to the mountains, just artists, so that, like, we don't have to worry about hiking the whole time. Like, that we'll actually stop and paint. Because usually when I'm going to the mountains, I'm going with my brother, who's like a turbo hiker, and there is no painting about to happen. It is all business. So, so come on. Maybe we'll make an announcement on YouTube and be like, anybody in the area, y'all come along. If y'all haven't figured out by now, I'm like a more the merrier kind of guy. And so I'm always like, everybody come. And then everybody comes, and then you're like, there's no more room. But no, everybody come. Let's see if I can just...
Erica, how much has your palette changed, like color-wise, since you left Florence Academy? Not like as a student, but not literally.
So right now my palette, I would say, instead of cobalt blue, I have cerulean. And that kind of came from moving my landscape palette indoors, basically. Because I found that a lot of the effects I was going for with botanicals mimicked what I was doing outside. And so I figured, oh, no, let's try this to get certain colors.
Yeah.
So I would say that that's pretty much what my palette is right now. And I added raw umber again. I wasn't on my palette for quite a while. It was something that at school we would use it for our underpaintings, and I stopped using it, and then now I'm kind of like coming back into it.
What was that color you said?
Raw umber.
Raw umber, yeah.
For the transparency.
Yeah, it's funny because I have raw umber on my palette, and I love it, but I find myself not using it as much as I used to, because I habitually will go to, I use so much like ultramarine blue and oxide red, and you can make like versions of umber.
Yeah.
And so, like,
It's almost like it wasn't necessary.
Right. It's kind of like it's not necessary to have, but I still love the color.
Yeah.
You know, it's a great neutral yellow.
I find it's useful just for kind of tinting things a little bit, like rather than using it as a base. I'm using it now to kind of tint a little bit when needed.
All right, it's kind of like, okay, now downtime.
I know, right?
Down for business. And so we basically have about 30 more minutes. No!
Power paint.
Has there been anything recently with your guys' work that you've been intentionally challenging yourself with? Like either using a more limited palette or a different technique or like a different idea in mind?
Yes, I mean, there's always things that I'm trying to experiment with. Right now, some of them is different types of like impasto-y techniques that incorporating them at different times and in stages of the painting. So sometimes it'll be that I'm like incorporating at the beginning stage. And lately it's been like different mediums that I can use to help push that. So another, like for example, I have a Venetian medium coming in that I wanted to give a try. I've used the Velasquez medium a couple of times on things. Oleo gel I use, and you can actually use it in a pasto-y way. It takes time for it to dry, but you can. So definitely been doing that. I'm always on the lookout. Like my big thing that I feel like I'm always trying to learn and push myself in is color harmony. I just feel like I'm a huge fan of paintings that do it so well. And like when I go, that painting, that's color harmony that's making that painting so powerful. And so always just trying to be a student of that and figure out what it is that's making it so good. So that's really experimenting with color and how it plays with your eye, because just so much of it has to do with the illusion that it's creating with your eye. So
along similar lines, I've been thinking more just conceptually about the idea of harmony and flow in a work. And so not just like, well, I would say it's more about when I'm painting, like how are things compositionally flowing, and it's almost like once you start really paying attention to that, you see how off your designs can be. But it's something that I like here, how I have a perfect point going right on that line.
yes.
Don't do that. You know, really paying attention to that, and maybe it's something that on my alla prima work, it could use a lot of work, but when you have something that you spend more time on, you know, it's worth doing the studies, it's worth doing the extra sketches and making sure things are flowing and harmonizing both on the value way and in line, like, and I'm just really looking at composition lately. That's what I've been really thinking about.
Yeah. That's a good answer.
When you guys are studying like composition, are you guys looking to classical paintings as what is informing you, or like what are you guys looking at in terms of like what do you define flowing and harmonizing as?
I like to look at oil paintings, but I find that I really also like looking at like Japanese woodblock prints, particularly the ones of like tree branches and flowers and birds, and I just watching how things are like shapes are organized and what like the sizes of shapes, where the lines are going, like how things are organized on an abstract from an abstract point of view, meaning rather than the subject matter.
Right.
And you can think of it too, like musically. You can think of how a song is written, and you can think of how maybe in dance, like how something's choreographed, like where important moments are, like where emotive moments are in the flow. And so you can think of it on kind of artistically across different media.
Yeah.
So I think about that a lot. Like, so it's not just in oil paintings that I'm using for kind of food for thought or inspiration. I also find too, it's like maybe you can come up with more interesting ideas if you branch out a little bit. In terms of what you're looking at.
I was listening to a podcast a while back called A Way with Words. It's one of those really nerd out podcasts I love to listen to, which it's all about like lexicographic, I can't even say that right, but like idioms and origins of words and all this kind of stuff. Cool. Anyway, it's a fascinating show, but they talk about if you're wanting to create good writing, don't go to what everyone else is doing right now, but go to what's been done in the past that's been forgotten. So they're like, go back to the 1800s and read some writing from that time period to see if there's some interesting words that were being used there that you can incorporate. And like, so it's just going back to what you were saying where, find your influences in unconventional locations and you won't do what everyone else is doing. So just a little dovetail off of what you're saying. It's good stuff.
Are there any overarching themes or like words that you guys would use to describe what inspires you and what your work is about?
Yeah, I mean, there's several. One of them, man, this is going to sound so artsy, but not to overuse the word in cliche, juxtaposition, but
Juxtaposition.
I am very interested in how in the Bible, there's a thing called the Beatitudes. And in the Beatitudes, it basically talks about the first shall be last. The meek are the people who will inherit the kingdom, meaning that they will be the rulers. The humble are the ones that will become leaders. And it kind of goes through this whole thing. And it's the idea of the servant is the leader. And it's honestly a classic example of like juxtaposed ideas to relate an idea of truth. I am fascinated by our society not grasping, even though we've been around for thousands of years, and we've had wisdom after wisdom from all sorts of backgrounds and practices saying that this is true, and us just not even recognizing it and still, being hard-headed to not know that that is a fundamental truth of who we are as humans, because we have such a sort of selfish nature. So all that to be said is doing work that glorifies the unsung hero as the true person, or creating a symbolic narrative in work that would push that idea is interesting to me. So that's one field that I want my work to have. So.
For myself, I don't know if I've done enough to be able to have I feel like I'm still too early in my in my painting career to be able to kind of solidify things.
Well, yeah, and whatever you say here will hold you to for the rest of your life. So make sure that you know.
Gotta think about it.
No.
But I can say that there are things that kind of I keep going back to. One of them, in a way, kind of like what you're saying, is this kind of idea of timelessness. Like I know that yours was in a slightly different vein, but
sure.
You know, the idea that if I'm going to look at something, I don't want to just like it for now. I want to be able to like it in 10 years when I like still look at it.
Yep.
And so, and I've been thinking a lot about what would make that happen. In terms of in like figurative work or having somebody experience my work, like there's a kind of psychology. I would love when, particularly with like portraits, for the viewer to look at the portrait and think like that person has thoughts in their head. It's not just kind of a surface level beauty or aesthetic, but that there's something going on kind of behind the eyes a bit.
Yep.
That's probably something that I find it keeps motivating me when I'm working on something.
Yeah. That's awesome. Look at Caroline, man, doing a great job with these questions.
I'm asking for myself.
Love it. Well, Caroline, what do you have in your mind and thought process with your work?
Well, I'm still trying to figure that out. So I've been doing some searching on what really inspires me, like when I think about like books that I read or movies that I watch that I feel like capture like the essence of just what draws me to like either watch them or want to paint something like that. And it's constantly Anne of Green Gables. That's my favorite book. I recommend, if anybody needs a book that is comforting and beautiful and talks about the beauty of life, 100% read that. It's very hopeful and sweet and simple. So I enjoy that. But I don't know, it's just a question that is interesting to ask artists, because it's nice knowing that like people are still figuring it out as well. Because there is a push as a young artist to like, and it kind of comes from that art school mentality of like, you need to make a statement, like you need to have a voice, and it's very forced in the beginning and it stresses you out. And so what's helped me is like just going back to thinking like, what do I like? Like what have I liked constantly for years? And what do I feel like is always inspiring me? So that has helped me. But Bruce asks a question. He says, I feel there are some high-level concepts everyone teaches about composition, but even for seasoned artists, there are a few that just understand it or can make a painting flow well. So his question is, what thoughts or personal struggles do you have with composition?
What thoughts or personal struggles do we have with composition?
I find it's about connecting. Like I might have an idea in my head about how I want something arranged and flowing, and then in reality, like if I'm, to make that happen. And then I find that when I'm, for example, I'm just looking at this right now. So I have this beautiful setup in front of me that I've selected from, and it's about choosing and drawing in a way so that your eye stays in the painting.
Yep.
And there are things that sometimes it's just my hand just doesn't go the way that I
yeah.
want it to go. And then you're kind of, you know, you don't want to push or like, you know, change the drawing too much or else it'll start warping, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, how to maintain that kind of balance between something that's accurate and then something that kind of on an abstract level in terms of where shapes are and how they're designed, you know, the arrangement of them. It's just difficult to kind of do it all at once.
Right. Yes. I mean,
That was a long-winded way of saying that.
yes. I mean, that is the darn truth. Where
I got there eventually.
You've got only a little bit of time to make all the right choices, and you have 100 different choices that all balance with each other, and you're trying to like push them all at the same time. You know, when you're working on, it's kind of like, the best way I describe it, alla prima is like jazz music. Mm-hmm. It's about the training that you have that you are able to do all in an instant versus painting in layers and working in the studio is like classical music. You have about 1,000 other layers you add to your concept and your design and composition. But with that comes time and thought and anticipation of the future and like being able to balance all of those things, and it's just more to balance, you know. That's why you never see a jazz band that has 60 different instruments, you know. It's 4, you know, at most. So it's the same thing here. You're like, okay, hue, chroma, value, composition, and you're trying to throw all of that in there at once, and that's where like the magic happens, and you know, separates you. But those are major challenges, and that's why alla prima is not necessarily it's where I like to train, but I wouldn't say that is what I'm known for. And so, like, for example, right now, my decision making is like, I have a limited amount of time on my hands. Yeah. What do I do? Do I focus on developing a few more flowers, or do I push more of the compositional elements? So, and well, my brain goes, okay, both. And I'm like, I don't have time for both. You know, so you have to make decisions based off of that too.
So we got a message from these people named Divya and Alex driving home from New York City. They're watching right now in their car.
That is awesome. We got to shout out to our peeps who couldn't be here with us tonight because they're doing really awesome things. So thanks for joining us, kids. Just Alex, don't watch and drive, please.
Safety first.
Yep, safety first. Hopefully Divya is the one that's doing that and you're only listening. Also, Madeline, is Madeline, right? Madeline and Derek? Yes. Derek are in the building. They are the fabulous florist people who have given us this beautiful arrangement that we've been throwing shout outs out throughout this live stream. If y'all happen to be in the area, need a beautiful flower arrangement, they are your people. And y'all should follow them on Instagram, and their Instagram tag is mood FLEURISTE, Mood Florist. So give them a look up and a follow and a like.
So, Madeline, I was wondering if you don't mind describing like what was inspiring you when you were doing this setup and like what the types of flowers are and stuff.
Oh, okay. Well, the main inspiration was what was still alive after 2 weeks in my studio. We've had a lot of cold weather, so I kind of try to hang on to flowers as long as possible so that when the mood strikes, I can make little things like this. I do this a lot in my studio to photograph. So one, what was still alive from those weddings, which were, you got them right, the chrysanthemums and the ranunculus. We were watching at home before we came over. And so those were alive, and then it was kind of trying to think of how to really create a full color story between those two colors. And so I kind of just walked around my front yard and found the yellowing peony leaves, which if you watched the painting from Life of the Flowers back in probably May, I think, the peonies that they painted are from the same bush that those leaves are from, so that's kind of a cool.
Oh, that's right. I forgot to say that. I'm so glad you were able to say that.
Yeah, so you're getting the full year of my front yard through these. And so I really love that yellowing color, and I thought it really picked up on the underside of the petals of the chrysanthemums as well as the kind of centers of those ranunculus. But because those leaves have a bit of a greenish undertone, I thought that they would really go well with the grapes, to kind of pull those greens out and pull the greens out of the stems, blend those, and then grabbed the pears because they also have a yellow hue but some browns, and browns really, I thought, picked up on the kind of bronziness of the mums, and also just kind of help blend a lot, like they help your eye just kind of blend between like the yellows and the oranges and reds. So I guess that's what I was thinking. I hope that's a good answer.
That is a great answer. Good answer. This is kind of off topic, and maybe it's an insult, but I was thinking to myself, I was like, does anybody else have the issue of every time you hear ranunculus that you want to say redonkulus? Is it just me? Or anybody? Anyone? Every time. That's the only way I'm going to be able to remember those, by the way. It's just a bit of a word association. That's all it is. Oh, man. The things we do.
So just so everybody knows, I put Madeline's Instagram tag up on the screen. So if you're interested in seeing more of her floral arrangements, go ahead and follow her on Instagram.
Woo! Y'all are going to get millions of hits after this. If only that were true. Wish we were that popular. One day, your flowers are going to make us famous. That's what it's going to be. That's what it's going to be. I know that sigh. That's like, I don't know what to do. They got so little time.
Yep.
You guys got 12 minutes.
Psst, you can stay a little later after the live stream.
Thank goodness.
I won't let anyone on YouTube know though.
Okay. We'll keep it a secret.
That's good. It'll be our little secret.
Yeah.
For sure.
What's the latest you guys have stayed up painting?
Doing what, these, or just like painting in general?
Painting in general. Like when I think back to my art school days of like staying up till 4 a.m.
It's more of like, how many hours did I stay up? Because it most certainly, I like went in when it was light and then came back out when it was light again, you know? So it was more of like what hour amount of time was it? I bet you I was working on my thesis was probably the worst. And I think I was up, close to 48 hours straight. And I'm also a stress starver, so like I just don't even think about eating when I'm like just crazy stressed. And I was trying to finish this huge show, and I had close to 400 people coming, and so like I the stakes felt pretty high, and I just basically stayed in the space, which was a theater space that I had done like the whole dressing room area, an installation, a whole installation on the stage, and then a whole installation in the foyer. And by far, it was way more than I probably should have bitten off. But yeah, I think I was up close to 48 hours for that. I had my dad staying up with me. I had my best friends. I was pulling solids and favors from everybody that I'd ever done a favor for. So, and we still talk about it. Like last time I was with some of my buddies, they brought it up. That he was like, "Do you remember that time?" I was like, "Yeah, I know which one. You don't even have to say it. I know which time you're talking about." Yeah, I love painting mums, not gonna lie, they're fun.
Okay, so we've got a question.
Yes, so this is from the florist's husband. I was recently introduced to this idea. In Chinese it's called Wu Wei, which is the way I've learned it is described as thoughtless action, sort of like being in the zone, like an athlete is in the zone. And I was wondering how difficult it is to get in the zone when you have people walking into the studio and asking you questions and you're answering things, and how different this feels from when you're painting perhaps in silence or just by yourself or whatever.
Have you ever rubbed your belly, patted your head while balancing a stick on your toe and a bucket on the top of the stick? Sometimes that's how I feel like it feels. Over the years of doing this, I've gotten a little bit more used to it, but it is very, very different from painting in the studio. In fact, I always tell my wife, like, you know, if you're calling, please let it be for like a very important reason and not to tell me that the squirrel came back, because like it literally will disengage me from flow, and it takes me like 30 minutes to get back into it. And so that is very true. But, you know, I think that there's no sweeter place to be than when you hit that space and like time just disappears. It just erases, you know. And the next thing you know, 3 or 4 hours have gone by. And I'm sure that you get that sort of same state when you're working on your arrangements sometimes. Is that not true? Do you ever have those moments where you're just like, you're so in love with doing what you're doing? You know, you're like, it's rare.
It's not rare, just there's a lot of different things going on. If it's 20 of the same arrangement, then it's really easy to get into that. Whereas if it's me photographing flowers, then yeah, 5 hours can go by insanely quickly, and then you're like, oh my gosh, I just spent 5 hours on Instagram content without even editing it or posting. So yeah, I would say so. Just like adjusting things so that they're just so, and it's the best spot to be in because I feel like you're not over analyzing.
Because there's almost a moment where you stop worrying or thinking about like the drawing, or like if you're modeling something, whether it's accurate or whether it looks good, or like you're just judging the work constantly. There's a point where you kind of, if you're lucky, where you stop doing that, and you're just interpreting, and you're not. It's almost like you're not kind of forcing something. You're just letting it happen, and the intuition kicks in. Those are beautiful moments.
Yes. Those are beautiful
Grateful
moments.
when they come. I hope they come more often.
So do you find that where you find some of the most joy is in like photographing the work and that side of it versus like, I mean, I totally understand the idea of like, I've got to do this same arrangement 75 times, you know. because you feel like your creativity is shot because you did the creativity once and then you don't have to do it for a while, and it's just about like, you know, screwing on the bolt to every, you know, thing. So, so is that where you find some of your joy is in the photographing the work?
Yeah, because it's experimental, and to a certain extent, you're not, I don't know, you're not liable to anybody but yourself in those moments. And, you know, obviously, I don't know how many professional painters you guys have that follow you that, you know, make their careers off of it, but I'm sure everyone here knows the like gut-wrenching, want to vomit stress of this is a creative thing someone's paying me quite a significant amount of money to do, and if they don't like it, like what's going to happen? You were talking about failure previously, and I think that it's just, you know, getting good with what you would probably consider failure, but the client might not necessarily see that either. So I think it's both. I think, you know, you also get that great feeling once you've presented the work to the client and everything's great and they love it. But as far as just experimenting and going into that wu-wei kind of flow, and yeah, definitely just sitting in front of a backdrop, kind of, I have a setup similar to y'all's, and just kind of play around and blurring your eyes a lot, seeing where your eyes are catching. Essentially, like, I just spend the 5 hours that you guys are painting on the actual composition, and just constantly make sure that, you know, one flower doesn't need to be half an inch lower to really sweep your eye through. And a lot of it, I think, getting into the flow is just being practiced enough. You have to have a certain level of skill, or else you're just going to be thinking and thinking and thinking.
Do you find when you're photographing work that you're concerned and thinking about your peers that are also professional florists more, and what their opinion would be of the work that you're putting out, or about the clients who are finding your work on Instagram?
That's a really good question. I think the reason I'm the happiest photographing just like the single bits of arrangements and still lifes that I make is because I'm not thinking about either of those groups of people when I'm creating it. So not that I'm not thinking about, you know, the people I want to sell my work to, but I think to some extent you just kind of have to do your own thing in your own style, whatever the artistic medium is, and the people that really like it will come to you. So it's, you know, it's good to think about what those people want, you know, like what you can sell them. But when it's just creative work, I think it's important to not think about that so much. And then I think if you do that, then you're going to have a richer creative voice if you're not, you know, stuck on comparison.
Totally. Well, we're rounding up close to the end here. Do you have any final questions?
So Carolina Elizabeth says, that's very similar to my name actually. My name's Caroline Elizabeth. Anyways, going back to speaking of health, it's been a while, but I heard that in the UK they were trying to get rid of cadmium paints. Any thoughts on the subject, or have you heard of this?
Yes, I have heard of it. You know, in our field, you know, there's two reasons for why they want to get rid of cadmium paints, and but one of them is for the purpose of contamination of, you know, just like your trash, you know, and it going into a landfill and heavy metals and that kind of thing. And then the other part of it is that obviously your own health. My thoughts there is that if you're a responsible painter, then a very small amount of action will save you any of the headache of any health issues. One of which, what I'm not doing, obviously, is wearing gloves. And if you don't wear gloves, you know, making sure you wash your hands thoroughly before you eat. There is no risk of it going through your skin. And frankly, cadmium is in everything. The most cadmium people get is through cigarettes. So if you smoke, you actually are inhaling that that heavy metal at a rate of I think it's like 200 times more than what your body, how fast your body gets rid of cadmium. So your body can get rid of it. It just takes a very, very, very long time. So all that to be said is I don't necessarily think that it's necessary, but I understand why they're considering it. But it creates such beautiful colors. I mean, I don't use cadmium on my palette, but I have many times in the past. But now I have all sorts of alternatives, and that are worse. I use vermilion, which is mercury, and I have lead, and so it's not like I have a pure palette by any means. But they just produce such beautiful colors, and it's in such small amounts that as far as it being significant in a landfill, we're not like a big industrial factory, but and I don't get rid of most. The worst we do is rags. They goes to landfill. All of the liquids are taken to the chemical waste. So, which you can find at your local waste location. That you can call them, and they'll tell you where to go and how to take care of it. This is an interesting question. That's the first time I've had that question asked.
So Tracy says, thanks E-Stokes. I hope Erica becomes a Painting from Life regular. Great conversation tonight.
So too.
That was nice.
As far as that goes, that will be a good place to sign off. Y'all, thank you so much for being a part. I'm not sure which camera I'm supposed to be looking at. I think it's this one. Okay. Thank you so much for being a part of tonight's Painting from Life. And please post at E-Stokes Studios Instagram and make sure to also tag their florist company as well in there, the one that Caroline gave you. And we will make sure to repost that for you on our story. But we would love to see what you created while you were being a part of this and watching it with us. Thank you all so much for tuning in. If you like this, please click the like button, click subscribe, all the things, click the bell, anything else. If they have a whistle, click it too, and we will see you here the next time we do this. Y'all have a great night.